Hey everybody, Dohrok here, and I'm going to do a walkthrough on setting up a custom VuhDo profile for yourself, and just how to make the add-on look nice and make it functional as a healing add-on. There's a lot of stuff that it can do. It can show you a lot of visual indicators in a lot of different ways that can be pretty beneficial for pretty much anyone. When you first have it though, there's not going to be very much to it. You're going to be given this panel 1 for your raid and party, and a panel 2 for some filtered out people like your target or your focus target. You're also going to have this VuhDo buff watch enabled by default, and there's not going to be anything to it, so that's all it's going to say. And we have a map button so that we can go into the settings. When we get into the settings, there are some tabs at the bottom for some different categories within there, and on the right hand side of each one of those we have even more categories. We'll start here under general, and the first thing we see is this operation mode, and there's this slider underneath it, and this slider lets us set a threshold of HP %, and we can have certain things happen if someone were to be below or above this threshold. There's also some built-in operations that you can choose from that will go ahead and do some stuff for you automatically. So for the emergency HP one, for example, if we are above the threshold, then our bar is blue, and if we're below it, then our bar is kind of like this reddish orange color. And you can also have this slider so that you can have that effect up to a maximum number of 10 people. Next to that, we have some filter settings. So if you were to have like your tanks, or maybe you don't want to show yourself in the main group, then you can just filter them out here. Like maybe you have them in a secondary panel. You have some lock panel settings so that you can move or not move the panels around after you've locked it. And you have some hide panel settings so that you can hide the panels under these situations. On the right side we have scanners where we can set the range at which someone is going to be like grayed out on the actual interface. You can do that either by 40 yards or by a specific spell, and you can change the spell just by typing it in. Under that we have some settings for if the target's out of range. The directional arrow does not work in classic, but you have to have it enabled if you want to show distance, and you can show distance on like the tooltip a little bit later on. There's a talent tree scanner, which will try and assign people's roles based on the talents that they have. It tries its best. It sometimes does a pretty good job. We have a combat log parser, which will just help the add-on stay up to date with like people's HP and everything. On the right side we have threat/incoming, where you can filter out some of the incoming heals that you see. If you don't want to like show your own heals or overhealing, then you can just uncheck them right here. We have Aoe Advice, where you can set certain thresholds of the amount of healing that needs to happen, and you can have some sort of visual indicator show up, like maybe prayer of healing icon you can have next to your bar if 20,000 HP needs to happen, and you can set that up in here. We have some miscellaneous settings, so if you need to have a message when you res someone, you can just set that up right here. You can also hide some of the default UI elements. You can show the ready check icons if you want to see if everyone's ready or not. And you can show your global cooldown as well if you want to show the little global cooldown bar on your bar that you're casting on. There's also some additional click support if you want to use both of these add-ons at the same time. Staying under the general tab, under this advanced section, we have indicators, and this is going to be what is shown on the actual bar itself. There is a bunch of different stuff that is built in for you that you can just kind of like go through and choose from, and there's a bunch of different spots around the bar that are designated where you can stick them. If there's any of these that you maybe want to change or edit, or you don't want a specific part of it, like maybe you don't want the roll icon, then you can edit next to that, and you can highlight the roll icon and you can remove it from this bouquet. So bouquets are getting a little bit more advanced into it, and they are good to go back and get more in depth with later on. They basically will let you set up custom visuals and custom clusters for showing a lot of different information around the bars. For example, if I want to show tank cooldowns on the left hand side, there is a built-in one for tank cooldowns, and you can show the tank cooldowns on the left hand side. And if you need to add anything, then you can just add it into this bouquet. So that pretty much covers the general settings. So we need to make the add-on look good. And to make the add-on look good, We have a couple different tabs here at the bottom. We have the colors tab where we can set all of the colors that exist within VuhDo. To change any of these, you would just click on one of these rectangles and you can change them. And then we have this panels tab at the bottom where we can change the actual sizing and like how the actual bars look and all of that. Under panels, we have the general settings for ordering, and if you leave this on grouped, then it will show it corresponding to the group number, and if you do loose, then it will kind of loosely order your entire raid. You have some further sorting options under that, so if you want to sort each group by having like the tanks at the top and then healers under that, then you can just choose tanks, healers, and then DPS. And if you leave it on loose, then it will sort the entire group by this. We have some panel settings under that for the panel that is actually like the bars are sitting on. If you want to change the color of it, you can just click on one of these rectangles and you can change the color of it. You have some settings for the actual edge size and some texture settings as well. And we have some sizing options for the bars themselves. You can just change any of these sliders like left or right or up or down and make modifications to the actual bar size or the spacing or the gaps in between each of the bars. There's an overall scale for the entire thing as well. And a little trick here is if you go under this move tab, there is this test option, and you can click on one of these bullet points to mimic that size of a group. So if I want to mimic a 20-man group, I can just highlight that. And if I go back to panels, it will show me a 20-man group. And then you can just kind of, you know, make your adjustments as you see fit without having to invite, you know, a bunch of other people into your group. We also have some bar options on the right hand side. This is going to be where we can set the texture of the bar. There is a drop down that you can go through, or you can do this little slider, and we'll just choose something kind of flat. There we go. Under that we have some additional bar settings. So if you were to put something on the left or right indicator, you can change the width of the left or right side right here, and you can change the mana bar height as well. If you want the bars to show a different color other than like the class color, then you can have it set to either a solid color or a gradient, and you can choose those in the colors tab. We have this damage flash is on by default, which will show a white flash over the person that gets hit pretty hard. You have a sensitivity of the flash itself if you don't want it to be as bright. And then we have headers on the right hand side. This is going to be shown what's above the bars where it shows like group 1. You have some options. If you want to not show that, you could just uncheck it. And if you do show it, then you have some options for like the size and the texture, as well as the font and the size of the font there as well. You can also show targets and target of target if you want to show that. And then by default on the right side we have some tooltip options, which VuhDo has some tooltips built into it, and if you can see that they get kind of covered up by the Blizzard tooltips by default. You can change the position here. If you choose custom, you can just kind of click and drag it and move it somewhere, or you can have it at the mouse when you hover over one of like your VuhDo frames. This can show you some information, like you can have your keybinds in here or what debuffs exist on that target. And you also have some color options for this panel as well. And then we have some text options. Text for pretty much everything that exists on VuhDo is right here. You can change how hit points are being displayed. If you want to change it from a %, you can show like the amount missing or the amount remaining. You can do that out of a total, or you can hide the HP if they are above this threshold that you had set in the operation mode too. You can change the size of the text, the font of the text, and the color of the text here, as well as some effects on the text themselves to make it fit a little bit better on whatever texture you chose for your bars earlier. And we also have hot icons on the right hand side, and hot icons allow us to have 7 slots for priority buffs that we want to keep track of, and we can show the icons for on the bar. By default, it's going to be anchored in the bottom left-hand side, and you can change the sizing of it right here with this slider for the actual icons themselves. So you can see that we have Power Word Shield in slot 1 and Renew in slot 2. So if I use Renew on myself, it's not quite all the way on the left-hand side, and Power Word Shield takes up slot 1, which is all the way on the left-hand side. And like I said, you get up to 7 slots with that you can type in here, as well as you can do certain functions like your Aoe Advice if you want to show your Aoe Advice healing icon as well. If, though, maybe you don't want to show icons for certain buffs, but you still need to keep track of some, you have the option to use hot bars. Hot bars give you 3 more slots where you can basically get a bar across your health bar to keep track of the duration of a buff. So if I just type in renew here, when I renew on myself, you can kind of faintly see this bar going across my health bar, which is just showing the duration of renew. So if you don't want to show the icon, but you got 3 more buffs that you want to keep track of, then you can use the hot bars as an alternative. And then we have some miscellaneous panel settings where you can change the raid icon scaling. You can see by default it is pretty large. You can make it smaller here. And you can also change where it's position as well as the offset from that position with these sliders here. You can also exclude some marks from not having these settings, so if you don't want to do skull with that, then you can just uncheck it. The frame strata is essentially how the add-on is sitting on top of the UI. So you can see right now it goes over top of all of the Blizzard elements. If you set this to very low, then it will go behind them. We also have some overheal text options, which by default overhealing is pretty small as displayed. It is this little small 1K that's appearing on the left hand side of my bar. You can make that bigger here, and you can change where the position is as well as the color.